Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Deal Stories. My name is Megan Cullen. I'm a dual qualified attorney and an executive committee member of the entertainment section of Beverly Hills Bar Association. I'm chairing Beverly Hills Bar Association's Deal Stories program, which involves us interviewing legendary attorneys in the entertainment industry. So I'm very excited to welcome noted entertainment attorney, author, lecturer, Peter Dekom. His extensive knowledge and expertise in the industry has earned him a reputation as one of the leading experts in the fields. So today is a unique opportunity for us to hear firsthand accounts of Peter's careers, deal stories from his past, and the inner workings of the entertainment industry. I'd also like to welcome Keith Cooper, who will be guiding us through Peter's journey. Keith is a partner at Morrison Rothman, and he practices a broad range of business and entertainment law with a focus on video game development, music, copyright and trademark law, and digital content. So thank you both for joining us today. Like many of those who have joined us, I'm really looking forward to this interview. So without further ado, I would like to turn the interview over to Peter Dekom and Keith Cooper. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Hello, Peter. What I wanted to do was give a proper, that was a great introduction, but I wanted to give a proper introduction focused on Peter. Currently, Peter operates as Peter J. Dekom Law Corporation. He graduated, I think, UCLA Law School in 1973. So this basically marks his 50-year career anniversary. And over that time, the number of accomplishments that Peter has had are probably too much to mention here. His primary practice areas are film, television, business law as well. I want to set forth some of the accolades a little bit and some of the, accolades and some of his clients and the people that he's worked with at the outset, because I want to take people through Peter's career, the history, and get some insights into who he is and how he became Peter J. Dekom. Anyway, as I mentioned, his practice area is primarily film, television, business law. He does represent such people as George Lucas, Keenen Ivory Wayans, John Travolta, Ron Howard. I understand is either counsel to or a board member of, he can explain that, Spelling Entertainment, the Geffen Company, and Imagine Film Entertainment. And some of the honors that I noted that I forgot that I think were important to mention, everybody should know. He was named as one of Forbes' top 100 lawyers, Premier Magazine's 50 most powerful people in Hollywood, Entertainment Lawyer of the Year by both the Beverly Hills Bar Association and the Century City Bar Association. And probably most important on his resume, people should be aware of, he is known as an expert pun maker. One who makes puns. Anyway, so that's by way of background. Peter, did you want to kind of add anything to that or mention anything there?
It's amazing when I listen to my introductions, I realize how far I've fallen. I mean, it's just a wonderful trip. What fascinates me is that for people who are in this business watching changes, the idea, well, it's going to change like this forever, I just start laughing. This business has gone through machinations. I've gone through machinations, and we ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to be an interesting summer, huh?
It is, and I think globally speaking, and just the industry wide, there's a lot of things on the horizon, and a lot of changes, and I look forward to you sharing that with people. I wanted to kind of start with a little bit in the background because your resume, you're extremely accomplished and have many honors, and you are deservedly being recognized for your contributions to the film and television industry. I'm not saying that to suck up, but I am saying that because I think it's important for people to hear how you became who you are and the things that you've done. And so I kind of wanted to start a little bit even before law school, before you made the leap to law school and the decision to go to law school. What were your areas of interest, after maybe you went to Yale University, so in college or even before college, what sort of things interested you back in that day that ultimately led you to think law school? Good idea.
Well, it was a less than honorable path in some ways. When I was at Yale, I was making movies and taking art courses and having a lot of fun. I applied to the UCLA Film School, got in, and had a film criticism course in which the professor happened to like a particular bevy of silent movie makers, some of which I objected to strenuously. I took it, did an essay, and I got a D. And I said, if I write what he wants me to write and I get an A, I'm going to drop out. I didn't come here to learn other people's opinions. I came here to learn how to express my own. I got an A and I dropped out. I wound up in nefarious jobs, including assistant director of public relations for the Los Angeles Philharmonic, sitting there writing bios for the concertmaster, taking pictures of Zubin Mehta. Oh, that's too exciting. I got a cover on Performing Arts Magazine. And then becoming a news writer for KHJ, which became KCAL later, and learning how to compartmentalize. I'll tell people when you're drafting, the best place to stop when you're drafting is the middle of a sentence. Because when you sit down, you'll finish a sentence and your mind will take you back there. I learned that as a news writer when suddenly the assignment editor said, Peter, we got some film coming. You got to edit it and get it ready. So I would leave one story and hop over to another. Great training. I wound up, the reason I went to law school is that's what you did when you didn't know where to go or what to do. This is the 70s, the actually late 60s, et cetera. And we were going through a recession in the motion picture and television industry. I do remember I have worked on, television before. Remember working on, Let's Make a Deal with Monty Hall, and all the people lined up out there was a TV cameraman, and they were running around, and one guy just, in costumes, pick me, Monty, pick me, fell over dead and is right there, just died. And people stepped over his corpse and said, pick me, Monty, pick me. They canceled the production that day, but I come from production. I've been a stage manager. I've been a TD, an audio mixer. I've been a cameraman. And so ultimately, when I'm sitting there saying, what am I doing? I said, well, do what everybody else in your class does, go to law school. So I applied to UCLA, got in, changed my mind and said, I don't want to go. Then I changed my mind again and said, I do want to go. And I was terrified because I saw myself as a creative individual, not as a business analytical, whatever, a suit. So I went and I was just profoundly neurotic, deeply anal. I typed my notes. I was ridiculous. I missed 3 classes in 3 years and was terrified. There were people, MIT and Stanford and all kinds of schools. And I'm sitting there saying, I'm a film guy. I'm a creative guy. I want to do right. I want to direct. And all these people are sitting there answering these very sophisticated Supreme Court analytics. I don't fit in here. So I just kept working. And the nice thing is they said, UCLA only gives pass fail. And I said, that's for me. And inadvertently, they said, well, we actually ranked the top 10 people in the class because we won't have to give COIF awards and law review, et cetera. And I inadvertently, and I absolutely went in and complained. They said I graduated first in my class. Turns out that was correct. It turns out the standards had been dropped for me. And I actually believe to this day that law school was the easiest academic experience of my life, inclusive of kindergarten.
Well, your experience was quite a bit different than mine. But that notwithstanding, I find it interesting, frankly, that you wanted to be a creative, and the practice of law, some people believe, is the antithesis of creativity. It can be stifling. I think there are ways to be creative in drafting contracts, reaching agreements and that type of stuff, but it's not true creativity. And also it's interesting, you had some, you were performing some technical functions, being, the assistant director and the things that you were doing. So I'd be curious, going from that, wanting to be creative and working on the actual technical aspects of film, when you decided, sure, I don't know what I want to do, maybe I'll go to law school to figure something out. How did you figure that you could be successful or make a contribution as a lawyer as opposed to a creative or technical contributor to film?
Well, when I was in law school, I created a quarter way at the American Film Institute, which I met Tom Pollock, who would ultimately be my partner in a law firm. But I think what I understood was whenever something was too technical or too complicated, even in film school, my fellow students would look to me, you do the mix, you run the mixing board, you set the, you do it. And I realized that part of what a good lawyer should do, you become a translator, because you've got two forces. One is the evil studio, and the other one is the wonderful, giving, loyal, amazing, creative talent. And I've actually switched sides on that a few times. But the notion here is you really have to translate what is going on in words that a client will understand. And, you know, having actually had to light a set, actually had to edit a film, actually had to do all these things in my misspent life. I understood the process. I've actually written a script that was produced by a major company, and they do not know who it was because I used a pseudonym. I pulled my pseudonym off of it just to make sure nobody could ever trace it back. And you would have to torture my son to get me to talk. But the idea of understanding the process, spending a lot of time with, I mean, I've had the fortune of working with some of the most incredible, creative human beings, some of the best writers in the world. Robert Town, you know, Paul Haggis, who's under a cloud right now, but I don't think it's a deserved cloud. And a lot of Gary Sherman, people who have written, and I pick up the words. I remember once somebody told me I handed a script to Clint Eastwood. I got back the following notes: good work. It's, to me, the love of the creative process, the respect for the clients who are able to bring something out, whether it's acting or writing, directing, the producer who has the taste and talent to get it made, and the husband to ignore the barriers, to understand the process, the players. I remember once I was threatened by a president of a Disney group who yelled and screamed because apparently I had been quoted as saying Disney would be the last place I take these projects because they make bad deals. He called me and totally excoriated me. And I said, who the do you think you are? You're the guy who brings a tray of goodies to the picture picker. I'm the guy who has all the things you want to put on that tray. And ultimately I said, you know what? And hung up on him. And I started laughing because I knew he would have trouble explaining to his bosses, I just pissed off one of the largest law firms in the business. It took him an hour to call back, groveling and apologizing. But it's funny when you got to know when to do that. And I would never get angry without being a method anger person, because anger gives power to the other person. If you're going to use anger, let it be fake anger, because then you control it. And you know what you're doing, highly manipulative, go for it. And I just, you know, the idea of whenever I'm dealing with a yeller and a screamer, I have another technique you're going to love. Call them on your mobile phone. And after they're yelled and screamed, hang up, call them back and say, I don't know, I dropped the call. Do that a couple of times. It just takes the wind out of their sails. But the idea of if you can give me the power to make you angry, thank you. Give me that.
I think that's phenomenal advice, frankly. I mean, I've been myself practicing for 30 years, and you meet a lot of those personalities that seem to enjoy argument for argument's sake, or just being, you know, getting a rise out of opposing counsel when you're negotiating a deal. Whether it be in litigation or simply transactional work. So that's outstanding advice, because I've often wondered, it's like, how do you deal with these people? So that's actually exceptional advice that even I will certainly take to heart. So I appreciate that. But
I love them. You know, it's funny. I've never been able to negotiate with Donald Trump, and I would like that. That would be fun. That's an easy button.
Yeah, I know.
Start with extreme flattery. Yep. I'll tell you one story that happened. Shows you how old I am, but way back before we had the internet, and when we were just getting faxes and stuff in line. I had to go to New York to negotiate a distribution agreement on behalf of a client, and I was going to go up against Skadden Arps, and they had no idea what my academic background is. There was no internet. They didn't care. So I went out and I actually did this. I went out and bought a powder blue polyester leisure suit. I really did this. And I went to New York. I pulled it out of my suitcase and I went to Skadden Arps. And I remember going in, and I decided I did very well in film school, and it came to an acting class, I might add. I walked down the halls and I did this. and in my powder blue leisure suit, which is, I threw it out when I got back because there's no possible use for that thing. But I sat down, there were 2 partners, 2 associates, and me on the other side of the table. And I kind of mumbled like, I don't know why I'm here. Eventually, I managed to get very good lawyers, but not specialists in the entertainment business, to accept the 5 off the tops as deductions in lieu of what we call distribution costs. The 5 off the tops are things like checking costs, residuals, taxes, et cetera, little stuff, cost of collection, et cetera. And I converted what was effectively a net profit into first dollar gross. And they were too proud. And we had the contracts set back and forth by fax and signed. And I remember walking out like that and left, got on the elevator, got outside, went around the corner, went, yeah! And my clients made fortune. Yeah, next time I was on the same side of Skadden Arps in a negotiation.
But this is the same, this is the exact thing that would never even enter my mind to try to do. So how do you conjure up that plan?
Creativity from film school. Dude, you get into costume or whatever it is. I did method work, but we were on the same side representing Jim Henson. They were doing a corporate acquisition and I was representing Jim as an individual. And basically it was a wonderful relationship. And I've had great relationships with big firms ever since. I've supervised some of the biggest firms in the United States in litigation and corporate matters because we got to work together. But in those days, the arrogance of someone coming from California, farther to Shore, into New York, the sophisticated world, we're all Ivy League, we're all this. Well, so am I, but I'm not going to tell you that. And enjoying the negotiation. It is interesting. The person who scares me the most, hi, y'all, good old boy, I'm from Arkansas. I'll tell you about it, that guy is probably, or woman is going to kill me or try to kill me by being a good old boy because they know what they're talking about. And that's the way it goes, you know what I'm saying? And I have to say, I've known a number of people like that who were just brilliant. And I never, one of the things you do, obviously, if you're going to negotiate with somebody, find out who they are. Now we have the internet to do stuff, and you're nuts if you don't at least look at the people you're dealing with, both the company. And the other thing that I do almost uniformly when I'm dealing with a company on the other side, even if it's sponsored by a major studio or major streamer network or whatever, I want to know if that company's got assets. That's the first thing I do. The second thing I do when I'm dealing with rights is I ask for reversion first, and reversion even after they produce something if they don't keep spinning off additional productions. Those are my starting points. And most people start with the ask for money. They look at money, credit, and perks. I don't go there. I want to know that I'm dealing with somebody who's solvent. And I have to tell you, when a lot of these major studios would use, one-shots, one-off special production companies, I want their guarantee, and I won't go any farther unless I get it. That's just, especially in this world. And when I was running the loan program for the state of New Mexico, I remember bouncing MGMUA as an acceptable guarantor. And I can't tell you how much crap I took from that. They were bankrupt 6 months later. I love numbers. I love keeping up with industry trends. I want to know what Wall Street sees. I want to know what the earnings reports look like. I want to know how the other guy makes a buck.
The overall theme that you're alluding to there is something that I personally find very, very important. Whether you go back to Sun Tzu, right? Knowing your enemy, and I think that's important. But I think what's important is knowing the business that you're operating within. And it sounds to me like, that seems to be one of your, not just the other party that you might be negotiating with or doing a deal, but can you address, because I feel it's very important if you're going to be representing a client, in order to do the best that you can for the client, is to really know the industry itself and to know if, their value within the industry itself. So my question really boils down to, you came up, it sounds like, working within the industry, and you emerged from the industry, and you knew the industry, and you were able to then start practicing in it. What advice would you have for people today if they wanted to do what you do and get involved in the film, television industry, how they should go about learning the industry? What resources should they rely upon to help get them familiar with the business, the movie business? What would you recommend?
Well, first of all, one must recognize that our industry exists within the context of a global and national economy. So when the Fed starts raising interest rates, my question is, what impact does that have on my deal making? And it's profound. One of the things you saw is an announcement by Warner Brothers that they were going to adjust their annual costs and reduce them by $3 billion. When the interest rates went up, they raised it $3.5 billion. And unless you understand the pressure that puts on the people at the top, which they then insert and push upon the people who work for them. I looked at, for example, when Meta announced the metaverse, I watched their stock and it didn't go up. They're not having a good time. I also think that people don't look at the obvious, like there's so much governmental regulation that is happening, that will happen. And a lot of it's coming from Europe. So I'd say understand the world, understand the context in which these companies operate, these CEOs, or when they do their earnings calls, whatever they do, you need to know that. And then you need to know the minutia of the business itself. You need to know who the people are. That means reading the trade papers. That means making contacts and talking to people. But I also remember something that happened in my most pretentious office with felt padding on the walls, antiques everywhere, my own conference area, semi-private bathroom shared only with Jake Bloom, and with a view to the ocean. Magnificent. And this poor little young lawyer comes in, and my office was designed to intimidate. I didn't want to be warm. You ever want to screw a lawyer over after you're finished? I didn't, they're going to be so reasonable. That terrifies. But in comes this young man shaking. And, it's a fairly small deal. I represent a producer production company, and he is representing a writer. And he asked me for 10 things. And I say yes to every one of them. And he looks at me with a stunned look on his face. Huh? I said, yeah, you thought you're going to come in here, ask for 10 things, get 5 and leave. I said, that's not what negotiation is about. Negotiation is about finding a deal, either blowing it soon so you can't make it, or making a deal that works for everybody. And I also say that if you close a deal that doesn't work for the other party, renegotiate it. This is not a fixed business. Things change. But he walked in there, I said, look, sometimes it's A to B halfway. Yeah, maybe. But sometimes A and B aren't the alternatives. You will end up at C. The idea is to start thinking. I was the most over-prepared lawyer in negotiations in the history of the universe. I had pages of asks. I had fallbacks. I had all that stuff. After a couple of years, I said, you know what? I ain't doing that no more. I'm going to sit down. I know this business well enough. I can do this. I made a $90 million deal in 45 seconds once with a very experienced business affairs executive at a major studio. And we closed the deal very quickly. And it's wonderful to deal with people who know the business, the people who are trying to prove themselves. You ain't going to do it. I'm waiting for the lie I haven't heard. I'm counting on it. Someday I'm going to hear something that someone hasn't told me before. And also understand that while you're negotiating with me, I'm running numbers in my head. I'm running fuzzy logic. It doesn't have to be precise, decimal point accurate, but you got to kind of get the feeling of the orders of magnitude of the money you're talking about. And it's got to flow back and forth in your head. I'm running numbers and I understand the business. I also look at vectors. I remember there was a time when we were in a transition between pay television and home video, which became very, very relevant. And my clients were totally, I want to get that pay television money. And I said, the vector on this says that this is going to happen in 3 years. Home video is going to blow pay television all to hell.
It's funny, 2 things. When I first heard the story that you'd mentioned about the kid coming in and asking for 10 things and giving all 10 of them, I thought your philosophy, it's similar like to my dad's philosophy, who obviously but he always says, as a general negotiating philosophy, and I think this is good for everybody to hear, and I tell this to my associates too, if you don't ask, you don't get. And it's like the most simple, straightforward negotiating philosophy. Or I like even, Wayne Gretzky, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, which is great too. So I think there's value in that. But I do love that story. If somebody is asking a question, is your experience solely in film, or did you do any work in music?
I did not do music, to my dismay. I used to laugh at music lawyers when they were going through the debacle of the music business. Now they laugh at me. But we're all going to go through the same stuff. I mean, I do understand basic business principles. I've been doing digital media deals for years now. I love people telling me how it's going to be and how, remember all the people yelling at me on NFTs and crypto and all the other stuff. And I said, the major blockchain I have is between my ears. But going through all this stuff is an understanding. If someone comes to me and they don't know what they're doing and they tell me, they will do well. They will get a fair deal. You come to me thinking you're an arrogant and you know everything, I will eat your liver.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing that, just because, personally, I don't like people that are pretentious. It's nice that you can see and cut right through that. And I think I believe this segues into a question I did have for you, because I believe it is very important to be honest, integral, because the business, whether it's film, music, gaming, small business, small community of lawyers. And I have always learned, and it has been instilled in me, that reputation is paramount. If you lie today, they're going to hear about it in New York. They're going to hear about it in Paris, and because it's that small of a business. So your integrity and honesty are paramount. In other words, your reputation, it precedes you, it follows you everywhere you go. The answer that you just gave leads me, makes me want to ask you, what is your opinion on the value of just reputation in the business, how to protect it, how to preserve it, how to establish it, and just generally the importance of it if you want to succeed as an entertainment lawyer?
If I give you my word, I will stand by it, even if I lose a client. I was once offered a retainer of $1 million a year to represent a client of a very questionable nature who effectively wanted to buy my reputation and credibility. I turned it down instantly. At the end of the day, people, if you close a great deal, that's wonderful. But next year, you might not have that deal, and you may be wanting to do something else. I didn't win the reputational awards that I've won over the years because I'm a good lawyer. I won them because people respected me and they took my word, and they knew that if I said something, I would stand by it no matter what. I can't tell you the importance of that, but I also can tell you, be really careful when you promise something, because the minute you add your reputation to a statement, you're stuck. And if you've done something that you don't think was right, talk to the other side, tell them what went wrong, ask for their help. And it's a small community. As I said, when I made that $90 million deal in, literally 45 seconds, it was based upon trust. It was based upon knowing the other person. There are people in this business. I was so happy when Steve Spear came back to Warner Brothers. He was their history. But what Steve had was, I will solve any problem you've got. My word is my bond, and I'm here to help. And that's really the approach to take. Arrogant people in this business, and there are an awful lot of them. Some of the most famous people I know who were making $100 million a deal did not know what a film rental was in the film business. That's a private conversation, Keith, but I'll tell you who it is. It is interesting when you deal with this kind of stuff. I remember once I was in the presence of the head of a studio, and I had almost no bargaining power. And he said, write me a check. And I looked at him, I said, how about it? Would an Italian do? And yeah, I had nothing. I had nothing. But I remember another situation where I was offered net profits, and I told the executive on the other side, I don't do net profits. I wouldn't represent somebody for net profits. I don't waste paper on net profits. And I got adjusted gross. At the end of the day, I don't take net profits to this day. I look at them and say, why are you killing trees for this? Why are you using paper for this? And it's, to me, the analogy is trying to pick up water in a net. Now I'm looking at the transparency issue that we're all facing with streamers. And, you know, I remember when HBO said, we will not tell you how many subscribers we've got. You can torture us. You can hang us upside down. You can put fire on us. We'll not that's yesterday's news. Transparency is inevitable. I'm waiting to see how it's dealt with in the collective bargaining agreements that are coming up. I'm having trouble believing that advertisers who are in the AVOD tier of these hybrid tiers that are coming out at some of the bigger streamers are willing to accept pure demographics as opposed to knowing where their ads are being placed. I've had the pleasure of representing media buyers, so I know all the games. I mean, all the minutia. I can tell you all the hidden overhead and studio deals and how you deal with, you know, incentives, film incentives. I wrote the book on film incentives. I'm actually convinced to this day that Georgia Xeroxed my work in New Mexico. Pretty sure they did, but it's okay with me. It's fine.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I want to get there, and in just a moment. Somebody is asking basically, what are your thoughts are on ADR, and I guess do you include them in your agreements? I mean, they're typical, right? But what are your thoughts generally? Because it is kind of a funny thing that, you know, the default seems to be we always have an ADR provision and you make a conscious decision to remove it. But that said, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. What are your thoughts on ADR generally?
I think that here's my philosophy of contracts. All that we've done over the years as a new medium, a new thing comes about, is we'll add something to the contract. And that's a huge mistake, because when I took contract law, I remember an expression, expressio unius exclusio ulterius. My rights deals, when I'm making an acquisition from a third party, are never longer than this. And basically it's all rights now known or hereafter divide, ancillary or derivative thereof, something like that. Basically, you ain't got nothing, I get everything. If someone's reserving rights, I make them do the list. If I'm doing the other thing, I try to reverse it. The idea here is stop the specificity. Stop it. Don't do it. And I've had this argument with heads of studios and networks and whatever, heads of legal departments, and they all, most of the ones who've gravitated up the hierarchy did very well in law school. And they say, you're right, but I'm not going to change this. It's a mistake. Warner Brothers recently had a list of things, one of those long lists, and they were all recorded productions. And what I was concerned about was the derivative stage rights. And they didn't put that in the list. So when you go through these things and you overkill, don't overkill. In my contracts, I actually prefer what I do is I'll do a very long deal memo, maybe 10 or 15 pages long, and then that's it.
You know, it's funny because I've often felt as though my theory, because contracts only get longer and longer and longer over the years, and my theory is people are scared. They see it in the contract. It must be there. It's there for a reason. I'm scared to remove it. And so they add stuff to it. And I think that jumbles it up and makes them longer. But your take is certainly refreshing. But I think, yeah, I mean, some of these things certainly could use some language removed from them to tighten them up. But let me.
Well, just one more thought on that. The most dangerous words you can put in a contract are including but not limited to. Open-ended?
Well, why do you say that? Because we do see that regular, but that is the exact opposite of limiting language, right? Especially where a rights grant is concerned, because now you're like, hey, it says not limited to. I mean, is that
the judicial response to that with a long list of things is, if you thought you had all the rights, why did you have to spell them out? You obviously meant rights like that.
Yeah.
And that is an argument you never want to have in front of a court. It's like so many people do so many stupid things in contracts. In the event of a bankruptcy, all rights revert. I'm the Easter Bunny, and you've never sat in front of a bankruptcy judge who's known by another title, God, can look at you in the gales of laughter when you put a provision like that in. You cannot repeal a statute in a contract. But I see these provisions in these documents, and they go on forever and ever and ever. And you know what? Because they're so complicated, if you wind up in litigation, and I have sat there as an expert witness or supervising litigators or participating in one way or the other, You watch all the mistakes that contractual transactional lawyers make. And you learn that when you talk too much and you put too much in the contract, sometimes more is much less.
I agree. You know, there's another question which I'm going to throw out there to you, but I just because I've addressed this so many times, I'm going to throw my opinion in, and I'd love to hear yours. Maybe it's similar, maybe it's different. The question is reasonable a good or a bad word in a contract? We see it in every contract. My thought, though, on it is you put that in there, you're basically saying, we're not going to make a decision here. We're going to wait for a jury to determine whether the conduct was reasonable or not reasonable, below the standard of care or not. To me, it's an objective word, but it leads to ambiguity because you say, I will act reasonably in the contract, and then you fight later over whether you acted reasonably or not. I find that to be a humorous word. It's in all the contracts. What are your thoughts about that? Because it's a good question.
Well, let me throw out an interesting approach to contract negotiation. When you have the bargaining power, you want everything and you want it specifically delineated. When you don't have the bargaining power, you want creative ambiguity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I've been doing that my whole damn life. And I know that creative ambiguity, where it's properly placed, it also really has, I know a lot of law firms sit there and say, well, we'll wait for the long form. I've never waited for the long form. I always draft my perception. Oh, well, no, we're not going to know it. We're not going to do it. Whatever you say or do, it becomes the map. And whether they take the exact map or not, you're basically dealing with it. I remember I was dealing with a bunch of related parties, and it was a big law firm representing 4 of the parties. I only represented 1. We closed the deal, and I immediately drafted a 7 or 8 single-space page deal memo reflecting everybody's deal, sent it to the other law firm. The law firm said, we're going to wait till we get the law firms. We don't need to worry about that. In the meantime, everybody has started up, the production stuff is going on. They're bringing on people. And one issue popped up that was really, really key. And the studio said, hey, you didn't bring it up at the beginning, so we're not going to deal with it now. And I said, look at page 3, paragraph 4. You didn't respond. I assume we got it. That took care of that one. I believe in writing down what your client and what you perceive the deal is or should be, and giving it to the other side, even if they are going to be the drafters of the major document. I cannot tell you how many times I've dealt with major studios have just taken my deal memo and put their standard terms on it. I just find it's better to be specific. It's better for people to reject things, or if they don't reject them, even if they say, well, I'm only waiting to the long form, at least you could say, wait a minute, you didn't respond. And over preparation is not a vice. Over preparation when you've got nothing to prepare for is a vice. But once you've got the deal and it's there, there's nothing wrong with putting it down. A lot of people are too busy, or they give it to an associate. The other thing that I recommend you do it immediately. If you wait 2 or 3 or 4 weeks and go back to your notes, whatever, it's not the same. I get back and I fire it out. Back when we dictated stuff, I was like bullet dictating. I had 3 secretaries, 2 during the day and 1 at night. And I kept them all just running ragged. Now I got this thing, I don't know, it's called a compute thing. And I'm faster on that keyboard than any secretary or assistant I've ever had.
Impressive. Among your many skills.
Or as they say, I know the type.
What's that?
I know the type.
Yeah, there's the pun. There it is. I want to ask, because somebody is asking a question, and it is in amongst my outline here of things I wanted to cover with you. So I'm going to ask it now, jumping ahead just a little bit, and then I do want to get to a couple of more substantive things here.
Like actually finding out what alternative dispute resolution is all about, and looking at the prices that the companies charge. I won't mention Jams by name. Oops, slipped out.
Yeah, you mean $950 an hour for
I look at all this stuff, and it's one of the least negotiable things in the world. But if you have to have it, try to put IFTA in there. It's a little warm and fuzzy little group of people who probably will make a better decision for you. But the cost of arbitration, we ought to, as talent and rights representatives, we ought to ask for the companies to pay for the cost. We'll pay for our legal stuff, but I shouldn't be forced to pay more than I would have to pay if I went to court.
Yeah, arbitration is certainly expensive. But let me just ask this, because this, like I said, it was on my list and somebody had asked. So I have kind of a group of questions here, but generally speaking, I have it under the category of advice to young lawyers. But more broadly, I'm not sure if this was a young lawyer or not, or somebody as opposed to somebody that's just practicing in another area, but they are asking about, and I wanted you to express kind of how people can break into entertainment law, the film and television business as an attorney. And as a corollary of that, or part of that, is what your recommendations are for business development, generally speaking. So how do you get out there and, I don't know, be it network with people? You're a very prolific writer. You do the blogs. You've written a book. You've made yourself available, 3 books. You've made yourself available, on board seats. All of that helps, obviously, being on board being on boards and meeting people and helping people, advising and counsel. But generally speaking, what is your advice with respect to breaking into this business as an entertainment attorney and developing business in this business?
Well, let's start with a proposition that if you don't have really deep roots in the entertainment business and you sign clients, that's the wrong way to start, because you're eventually going to have to fire everybody that you got unless you stumbled into something miraculous. Number 2, know your craft. It's important that you understand what Article 16A and 16B are in the WGA agreement, or understand continuity of employment, or how a writing executive producer is compensated. Read the damn collective bargaining agreements. Understand that bankruptcy law, copyright and trademark law are very relevant. Securities laws, I can't tell you how many entertainment lawyers participate in illegal solicitations of equity in violation. It's a felony both under federal and California law and many other states. These are not options. These are not things that you can sort of, I don't deal with that. Yeah, you do. And every time money crosses an international boundary, there's a tax consequence. If you don't understand at least preliminary taxes, I tell everybody there's no such thing as entertainment law. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's contract law, it's copyright law, it's secured transactions, it's securities, and you go through it: bankruptcy, banking law, commercial law. It's an endless array of different legal issues. And you, as an entertainment lawyer, you think deal making is what this is about? I'll eat your liver. It's about everything. It's about understanding the nexus of a deal. So if you're going to start and you want to be a transactional entertainment lawyer, maybe you start as a litigator. Maybe you wind up for a digital startup, figuring out what they're doing. Maybe you're learning about European digital tech law, or GDPR, or California privacy laws. Maybe you're developing an expertise in a niche that will be very valuable to an entertainment firm. Maybe you're wondering about what is the liability of an influencer? What do we have to do if children can see the image on the screen? Where is your expertise? What are you bringing to the table that somebody else doesn't bring to the table? Why are you special? And once you start developing that ability, and you don't have to be a tax lawyer, but you do have to know tax issues. You don't have to be a bankruptcy lawyer, but you got to spot those issues. You don't have to be a securities lawyer, but you got to know when you're raising money, you got problems. All these things are things you know, and maybe you bring in experts as you raise your profile, start dealing in more complex transactions, and you develop a nexus, a network of people you trust to help you with all these various issues. I've never been a litigator, but I have supervised litigators repeatedly and watched them blow it out there and wish I were making the argument to the appellate court and not them. But all that notwithstanding, anybody who thinks they understand entertainment law isn't an entertainment lawyer, because it changes every single day.
So, I want to come to I'm going to come to that next, because I think that's very important. I'm going to skip a couple of things here, but I did want to follow up because of the advice on the what to do. What's your advice on what not to do if you want to make it in this business?
Be careful telling people your connections when you ain't got them. Be truthful in who you are. And understand that before you open your beak, you need to have enough substance between the ears to be able to make that beak conversation valuable. And when you don't know something, ask questions. I can't tell you how many people are afraid to ask questions. There are people who are watching this who, way back when we were doing relationship, the mentor relationship I've had with a number of associates, I love hearing people ask questions. I do not lose respect for people, even when they ask the most basic question in the world. I actually admire their guts for saying it. And I admire their willingness to say, I don't know, I'd like to learn. And it doesn't matter if you're on the other side of a deal and you have a question for me. And sometimes I don't have the answer. Sometimes I'll go out and try to look for it. Sometimes there isn't an answer. Sometimes we're on the cutting edge of change. But asking the questions and being humble enough to say you don't know is more important than coming across as a smart ass.
Good. I mean, I'm going to jump ahead in the interest of time here, because I'd like to get your perspectives on the state of the industry today and where you
California, next question.
And where you think it's headed. And specifically, you've been doing this in this business for 50 years. In your opinion, what is the most significant change to the film industry in the last 50 years?
Well, that's a silly question because we're worried about what's happening now. And what I'm seeing right now is, I mean, I'm looking at the business plans of a lot of companies, and I have to say there isn't a streamer out there that has figured out what they need to do. They should have started earlier, because the mistakes that are being made are being paid for in the compensation being paid to talent and rights holders. We want everybody to succeed. And, you know, the streamers have made some very serious mistakes. They're making more of them now, but they've also done some
just to be clear, because the streamers in what my company does, digital entertainment, is much different than I think you're referring to it. Well, we're not talking about individual streamers. Are you talking about Netflix and those?
Yes, I'm talking.
I want to be clear.
I don't want to single out Netflix, but all of the companies are facing these issues. And look, they've done some absolutely spectacular things. Documentaries on these streamers have been absolutely spectacular, and it's opened doors that were never open before, for which I'm very, very grateful. But transparency is there because you're hiding something. Why are you hiding it? Because you're hiding it because it isn't working. You're hiding it, or because it's working so well, you don't want other people to know that you're making so much money. In the end, transparency helps all of us deal with the issues. When you have a company that says, I want all rights to these content pieces in perpetuity and exclusively, especially the ones I pay for, they're cutting off a revenue stream that we counted on for millennia, and they're coming to realize this finally, and that is the aftermarket, the tail. Library assets, it's not why someone signs up to get your service. They want the current hot stuff. The other stuff you can license non-exclusively to third parties. The problem is they've destroyed the third parties. The cable business, the broadcast business, the syndication business, that was our aftermarket. And, you know, watching Showtime decide, okay, we're going away. It's not Showtime anymore. And you realize we need all these pieces to work together. We need everybody to cooperate. I would actually think that if I were in one of these content companies, I would want talent to take less money up front, but really pay them on success. And the only way you have a metric of success is to monetize viewing hours. And viewing hours is the most secret part of the business today. That will change. Not maybe, 100% it will change. I've been through it so many times when companies have drawn fierce Maginot lines in the sand. And like the good Nazi I am, I go around and invade Belgium. But the reality is we all benefit knowing what's going on. We all benefit when we have problems, and instead of hiding the truth, deal with it, talk about it, find ways to reward success. Maybe we don't pay as much up front, but maybe we pay a lot on the back end. Let's lure the people in. I remember Carsey Warner, when they had the whole bunch of very successful shows. Tom Warner bought 2 sports teams, including the San Diego Padres. These people made fortunes. You can look at Dick Cook is still making. Dick Wolf is still making a fortune in television. The reality is those who are prolific and provide very successful entertainment, having worked at Lucasfilm when we made a net profits deal on the first movie, and then in order to get the second movie, which you only had a right of first negotiation matching right, they had to give us back the rights to the first movie to get the second, third, and fourth. It's amazing how synergistic it can be when everyone's on the same side.
But what we've seen, I mean, what is it? ArcLight, Regal. I think both have gone bankrupt, movie theaters. How is this? I mean, a lot of that has to do with the pandemic, I imagine, and people stopped going to theaters. But at the same time, it seemed like content for theatrical releases is not what it once was, or everybody prefers the content in streaming. What I wanted you to address, I found it was interesting. I believe this to some extent, and I think you have different thoughts, but I saw a quote from attributable to Steven Spielberg recently. He's like his philosophy.
Oh yeah, he used to direct.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, I remember him.
But his approach was, movies are a place for the sights, the sounds, the big thing. You're not going to be able to play. Avatar is not going to be the same on Netflix as it is in a theater with the surround, especially IMAX or with the surround sound. So
IMAX, by the way, has not suffered during all of this. The large format exhibition houses are making out like gangbusters.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into the actual question here. I mean, are these going to coexist, or is streaming ultimately going to just remove motion pictures or theaters from the equation at some point in the future? What are your thoughts for the future of film, and what are your thoughts on how streaming has impacted film?
Well, I did a presentation in Mexico a couple of years ago entitled "Film, More Than a Bathtub Ring." But the truth is, we haven't seen the decline hit bottom yet. There are 300 malls out there that are going to close. The big shift in cinema has been the change in malls, the change in retail practices. Younger generations don't routinely go to movies. The people who routinely used to go to movies were over 45. They went every week. That's what they did. Now their kids during the pandemic hooked up their TVs to everything that they want. They've gotten out of the habit. And when you think about the cost of marketing a movie, it's prohibitive still. So we've basically created our own hell with the motion picture business. You also have to realize, why are you in a theater? Because you have a huge screen and an amazing sound system. I have 3 of them in this place, right here in my home. 3 amazing sound systems, huge screens. That isn't going to do. A lot of it has to do with the social phenomenon. If you have little kids, they go and get into trouble together in the matinees. I get that. A horror film, isn't it good to be scared with other people next to you, screaming and yelling and acting like idiots? How about a comedy? Sit alone and watch the comedy and laugh by yourself, maybe with your wife or girlfriend or whatever, boyfriend, whatever. Silly. I think part of it is our failure to understand the social fabric of going to movies and how it's been eroded. To me, when we had 40,000 screens in the United States, we were overscreened. I think we're better off somewhere around 20, 25,000 screens, and we're going to get there. We will be at that level. But the metrics of theatrical exhibition don't make sense. The marketing costs, it's marketing. And people will not get behind movies unless they're the $150, $250 million production cost movies. That's just not sustainable. Netflix can do it. They've got the idea that they have this content and they make it, and some of it's spectacular and some of it isn't. But what they did learn, and I think most of the streamers learned, is those theatrical exhibition windows that preceded the appearance on streaming almost never justified the cost. And I think the costs are doing it. And also, we live in a highly distracted society. I mean, I watch people walk down the street like this. And they say, well, there's nothing like a big screen. You want a big screen off your smartphone? Hold it up like this. It's amazing how big that screen is. We just don't understand the technology and the sociological impact of content consumption. It's not what we had when we were younger. It's not going to see Lawrence of Arabia in 70 millimeter with surround sound, which blew us all away. It's not about HAL. It's not even about the old Avatar, the first Avatar. It's about understanding people don't consume content the way they used to. And older people want it to go back. It won't. We'll still have it. But what do you do with a movie theater? The other problem with a movie theater is financing it. And that is a single purpose piece of real estate. You can't turn it into an office building. It's a single purpose. So you can't say I'm pre-renting all the space and go to a bank and say, see all my rental agreements? It doesn't work that way. And so financing the building and construction of theaters is very different. We need to do a ground up reinvent, and nobody's doing that yet. We're trying to do it. We're trying to buy people open passes. You come in many times you want a month, fighting over the allocation later. But we are mired in the past and trying to recapture it. It isn't going to go back to the way it was. Never will. It will be something else, but it will be there, whatever that something else is. The metaverse, it's a nice place. It ain't going to be there either. Everything that we think is going to be here forever won't.
Just a reminder that it's past 1:25, so we're getting close to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we're at the 5-minute mark, and I wanted to end on the following note, because I had read this about you.
Uh-oh.
And I thought this is something you might want to share with everybody here. But apparently you went on a trek in Africa and you came face to face with a silverback gorilla. Why don't you tell us about that? We can end with that story, because that's a good one.
Well, I love Africa. I've been there, and I started going in the 1970s when wildlife was abundant, continued it over the years. I've been on gorilla treks numerous times. By the way, it's very taxing. You're walking on top of branches. So if you're not in good shape, don't even think about it. But I came face to face. I'm an avid photographer. I would carry 40 pounds of photographic equipment everywhere I went. So I went to a park in what was then Congo. It's now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And it's a park there. And we trekked and we found a happy family of gorillas, as I call them. The gorillas were magnificent. You're out of breath, you have nothing left, and you see them, and suddenly this energy infuses your body. You're excited, it's amazing. And being the avid photographer that I was hell-bent on taking amazing pictures of the male silverback. And I was told, if this particular male silverback charges, you don't cow down the way you normally do, you look him in the eye. He charged. And it happened so fast, I couldn't get scared. And he was there. I could feel his breath on my face. And he looked at me and he said, this is my land. I control this. You're here because I let you be here. You watch yourself. So he backed up and left. He charged me another time because I didn't learn the lesson. But I will tell you, facing a charging gorilla is often a piece of cake compared to dealing with some of the people I have to deal with.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if that helped you deal with some opposing counsel, but that's an amazing story, and I don't know that I would have followed that advice. Mine would have been something closer to panic. So nice job there. Anyway, Megan, or Kelton, I think you wanted to wrap up, so I will turn it over to you. First of all, Peter, thank you so much. Your stories are fascinating. Your wisdom is amazing, and your expertise and knowledge is unsurpassed. So I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you for an hour.
Well, thank you for doing this ugly job.
As well. What was that?
Thank you for doing this ugly job. I know it's quite a burden on you.
No, it was a pleasure. It was seriously, I enjoyed it, and hopefully everybody in the audience has enjoyed it as well. And with that, I think Catherine was going to cut us off.
Well, thank you so much for everything. I'm honored to have been here.
Thank you
Peter.
both, gentlemen. I hope everyone has a great day.
Bye.